coworker slams me against a wall, so I frame him, make him lose his job, his license, and custody. Here's what happened. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell for notifications. To start off, I want to clarify that I went way overboard, and at the time this story took place, I was at a bad spot in my life. But I do not regret what I did in any way. So about 4 years ago, I was working as a certified nurse's aide. I later lost my job for unrelated reasons and never went back into the field for other reasons. While I was there, I was one of 4 who could train the new people. This is only relevant as the person this involves, who will be called John, was one of the guys I trained at our facility. John, for the most part, was easy to get along with, but had a temper, and everyone was aware of it. What I didn't know at the time was that he was also fighting for custody of his child. One day, about a year into him working there, he had messed up some charting. No big deal. I fixed it and corrected him on his mistake. He at first was confused, but I just explained that he might have gotten the charting numbers mixed up and that it was no problem. Now, for reference, we did our charting paper style at the desk located between the 2 halls, and occasionally our residents, or patients, would be sitting in front of it while chatting with us. As most of them were dementia care, they never really remembered what would be said. But regardless, we never talked about anyone by name, only room number or chart number. About an hour after this, I got done cleaning up from a resident shower and he came in the shower room and asked to talk to me. Sure, that's fine as it was a private area. He made mention that he didn't appreciate me correcting him in front of people. It made sense, so I apologized and told him it wouldn't happen again. I don't know where I went wrong, but he started getting loud about how it was his hall, and no one had the right to talk to him like that. Now I'm ticked. I told him that 1, we don't have hall leads at our facility, nor does any nursing home I've seen, excluding maybe our nurses who are in charge. And 2, I've been here for years longer than him, and apparently nothing I said while training him stuck. This didn't sit well with him. He proceeded to pin me to the wall of the shower room with his arm across my throat and hand holding my shirt. As he held me there, he told me that if I ever talked to him like that again, he was reporting me to state for IDOWorkHereLady violations. Now, IDOWorkHereLady is not something I take lightly. One slip-up could cost you everything in this field with an IDOWorkHereLady violation. I was red with anger. My thing is, I'm double this guy's size and didn't want to lose my job for fighting with a coworker. The place was terrible, but I enjoyed helping the residents. So I started thinking and immediately had an idea. If there was one thing I knew, it was that the only thing worse for your license than an IDOWorkHereLady violation was mistreating the residents. So I started my scheme. We had a man on our hall who had brain damage from football, and as such was highly combative and took 2 people to normally handle him. I was able to do him on my own generally, as I talked to him about football while taking care of him. I played defensive line in high school. That day, he had developed a bruise on his chest, and I had no clue where it came from. But I had where I was going to say it came from down. I immediately called in John to help me transfer this resident to bed. As we got done and went into the hall, I, saying it just loud enough for several CNAs and nurses to hear, stated, "I don't care why you did it, you never do that to a patient." He was taken aback by this whole statement. It clicked after about 5 seconds what I just did to him. The nurses had me write a statement in which I mentioned I had asked if he knew where that new bruise came from, and John told me that while he was walking the resident to the bathroom, he kept squeezing his arm, so he hit him in the chest. This patient was known for squeezing arms and wrists when being walked. The next day, I came in and found out that John lost his job, and police and adult protective services were pressing charges on him. I don't know if he was found guilty or not. I did find out a few weeks later, however, that not only did he lose his license, he also completely lost custody of his child to his ex-wife and got no visitation. On top of that, he had to sell everything he owned to pay for his lawyer. Needless to say, I could have been a little more fair with him, but I loved watching his life burn down around him. Let it be learned. Don't grab or threaten people who can ruin your life at the drop of a hat. Yikes, I don't know how I feel about this one. I get it, this guy has a temper and he did get aggressive towards you, but you've literally ruined his life over it. We don't know what he was going through and what it was that was really making him so angry. Maybe that divorce with his ex-wife was really nasty, and some of those feelings are trickling up in other things around him. I'm trying to play devil's advocate here, because I do think this was way overboard. I'm not saying that it should have been without punishment at all, but this just seems excessive. Who knows what kind of state his life is in now? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and don't forget to subscribe. I quit on the spot while we were understaffed and left my manager in tears. I worked at a retail store in the mall. The store is divided into men's, women's, and children's clothes. I always worked women's, and on the weekdays, I was always the only employee in that entire section. Yesterday, myself and 2 other employees clocked into our shifts. My manager, Lisa, pulled me aside and told me, "Your dad's called the store 5 times asking for your schedule. Please tell him to stop." I got extremely confused because that didn't sound like something my dad would do. I even texted him and said he never called the store once. I had a bad feeling and asked if she gave my dad my schedule, and she said she did. I then told her that that wasn't my dad, and she had no right telling a strange man my schedule. She got annoyed and told me that it wasn't a big deal and I was being dramatic. I then quit on the spot, which only left her and 2 other employees to watch the entire store. She kept apologizing and even burst into tears because they were understaffed. Am I the jerk? Your manager's not treating this with the seriousness it should be treated. This is a strange dude calling the store and asking for your hours. There are all kinds of red flags going off there. I think the manager just didn't want to admit how big a mistake she made. This comes down to your employee's safety, and that's not something that should be taken lightly. This guy wouldn't be so persistent in calling the store and asking for your schedule if he didn't have some kind of nefarious intent. If your manager can't be trusted with your safety, then yeah, they don't deserve to have you work there. I employed the sheriff to bring the police to court. This is a really old story, but I got reminded about it recently and thought I'd share. Years ago, I got a speeding ticket in Worcester, Massachusetts. It was a typical speed trap where they sit at the bottom of a steep hill, knowing that lots of people will exceed the very low speed limit because gravity. It was bull, so I decided to fight it and at least make them work for their $100 fine. I read everything I could on fighting radar tickets, and one strategy was to check whether the police department had proper FCC documents on the radar used. If they don't, the radar info is inadmissible, and you probably win your case. I went to the Worcester police station and found the records department down in the basement. I showed them the ticket and explained that I wanted to view the paperwork for the radar that was used to record my speed. I had to wait a couple of minutes, but some official came out and sternly informed me that civilians don't have access to that information. I asked a few people how you request records for a court case, and it turns out that, at least in Massachusetts, that's one of the things that the sheriff's office does. So I went to them, paid $50, I know, on a $100 ticket, and described the documents I required. I have to admit that by the time I had to go to court, I had kind of forgotten about the sheriff's department. But I did notice this police officer sitting in the audience section with all the other people fighting tickets. This guy wasn't your typical police officer though. He was wearing a very fancy uniform, and his hat had all kinds of gold braids on it. He did not look happy. Traffic court being traffic court, it's all kinds of disorganized, with a bunch of citizens sitting around waiting for things to start. And of course, the proceedings plod along at a snail's pace. Finally, my name is called after about a half hour, and this police officer comes over to me and explains that he's the captain or lieutenant, I forget now, in charge of the entire records division for the Worcester police, and he has the radar records in his hand for me to examine. So I look it over and it all seems to be in order. so I thank him. He's visibly angry about having to spend his morning sitting in traffic court over a $100 citation. Totally worth the $50. To this day, I don't know whether someone at the sheriff's department was just messing with the police department by naming the top guy in their records request, but I thoroughly enjoyed the experience. Don't want to let the citizens see your records? Fine. I would have loved to have been there when the sheriff's department showed up to serve the head guy with a court order. Oh, by the way, I lost the case. I don't really know what to say to this one. Kinda sounds like you just wasted everyone's time and ended up spending an extra $50 for no reason. I guess they did point out that the moral of the story is supposed to be to let the citizens just access the records for the sake of ease, but I can see where that could potentially be a problem. I wouldn't think that that's the kind of thing that just anyone could have access to. After all, how do they know that it's not being tampered with? But at least our original poster got some mild entertainment out of all this. Entitled mother yells at me for infecting her family with Corona music. Let me introduce you to a new Karen, the Indian Karen. A little longer hair tied into a ponytail and rolled into a bun that serves the function of hiding all of the 7 deadly sins. A voice shrill enough to make all the street cows turn their head to look at their mistress. A gold necklace to announce her dreaded arrival, one that I encountered. I don't know if anyone's read this article, but it talks about how scientists converted coronavirus's famous spike protein into music. I have no idea if it's legit. I thought if it's true, it's cool someone was able to do it, and thought I should share it, so I did. To Karen's son, a good person and a good friend. He's happy that smart people are still left in the world. The next morning, my mum calls me from the other room and says someone's on the phone. I pick up, and this was the conversation, roughly translated from Punjabi. Hello.
You sea-sucker, sister effer, son of a bee! How dare you infect my family!
At this point, I just woke up, and am still in a weird half-sleep phase, wondering to which sister I never had she was talking about. My mom chimes in at this point.
Shut up, Karen! Don't you dare speak to my son like that! I'll speak! Shut up or I'm hanging up!
What's going on? Who are you?
I have Miss Karen on conference. Did you give her son coronavirus?
What? No.
Don't you lie. I've seen the music you send my son. It's coronavirus.
It took me a full minute to realize what she was talking about, and then it hit me. Have you even read the article?
Don't you talk back to your elders. You're acting pretty elderly now.
Those two argued for 15 plus minutes. They started yelling at each other about other things like I'm a bad influence. Karen doesn't know how to talk to anyone, and stuff like that. I finally try and interrupt and say, it's a translation of what a scientist at MIT did. I put the phone on speaker and opened the article and started reading all the technical terms, which her 5th grade dropout butt would not understand.
You're not making any sense. You're lying. You taught him to lie? What kind of mother are you?
She finally breaks me. Apparently better than you. Did friend show this to you, or did you open up his phone without him knowing? Again.
That's none of your business.
I cut the call and immediately call my friend. I tell him everything, and he's mad. This was the 6th time this month she'd gone through his phone. Her excuse being,
I don't want any local harlot to corrupt my son. It's my duty to make sure my son marries a proper Sikh girl without any distraction.
Yikes. Okay, again, gonna tread a little lightly here because we're dealing with different cultures. I know parents in other cultures can tend to be a little overbearing, but I'd like to think that most of the world has moved past this way of thinking by now. With every generation, it gets harder and harder to establish this with your kids. With the internet being such a prominent thing in our lives nowadays, the world is a much smaller place, and those cultural differences are getting smaller and smaller. Those extremes that were once considered normal there are no longer considered to be what the children want. They should have the freedom to choose the life they want to live. And honestly, this kid needs to get away from his mom as quickly as possible. Her snooping through his phone and trying to decide who he's gonna marry and stuff like that when these kids sound pretty young already is kind of insane. You can want this all you want, but at the end of the day, the kid has to be on board. And the harder you push, the harder they pull away. Entitled old man wants me to get his groceries for him when I'm 8 months pregnant. Whilst in university, I was working in a popular supermarket chain as a team leader. I worked evenings, so this meant I was essentially in charge of the checkouts as there were no managers in. I wore a headset, and if the cashiers needed assistance, they would buzz me and I would go help. It wouldn't say what help was needed on the headset, just which number checkout. One night, I'm in the middle of the store putting away some abandoned items. My headset tells me checkout 4 needs help. I'm on it. As I'm walking over, checkout 8 also buzzes in. Fine, I'll go there next. It takes a good couple of minutes before I get to checkout 4. Some discounted items weren't going through, and I needed to authorize something. It took about 3 minutes to put through all the items that the customer wanted, and then I make my way over to checkout 8. As I approach, I can hear this guy causing a scene. He's moaning about how long I'm taking and how incompetent we clearly are. As I get closer, I see this middle-aged man with his arms in the air in a come on gesture, complaining to the cashier that he's been on his feet all day, and all he wants is another box of eggs. I'm super polite and ask how I can help. He turns with the biggest frown, and I fully expect him to rip me a new one. But alas, he suddenly looks sheepish, and his body visibly shrinks in with shame. You see, Redditors, I was 8 months pregnant at the time and as big as a house. The cashier explains that the eggs the man chose are broken and he needs a new box. Immediately he says, I can go get them? There isn't even a queue behind him. He could have gotten them at any point. I say, no, that's okay, sir. You've been on your feet all day. Let me get your eggs. I waddle away and take my time. At least he had the decency to be ashamed when he saw you. He was probably just having a bad day and was taking it out on the poor cashier. As soon as he gets one look at you and sees why exactly it took so long and probably feels really bad for even having to make you move, he's rethinking whether this was all worth it. The fact that there was no queue and he literally could have just walked away to go get them adds a little something else. He definitely wasn't feeling as big as he was before you walked up to the counter. I said I'll support my son's children, but not his widow. My son divorced his wife of 10 years to get together with their nanny. I told him that he was making a mistake, but that he was an adult and could make his own decisions. He became a crappy father to his children. I wish I could say differently, but there it is. I did the best I could to ensure that my grandchildren knew they were loved and part of a family. My ex-daughter-in-law also remained. We had known her for 14 years, and she was always kind and friendly with us. We used the money we were going to leave to our son and set up educational funds and a trust fund for his children he was neglecting. My son had 2 children with his new wife. She always held it against us that we told him that she was a mistake. We didn't get to see them very much. She didn't want them around his older children. She didn't want to be around his first wife. It never ended. My son passed away last year. He left her a life insurance policy and a lot of debt. She was a stay-at-home mom, and her only job previously was being a nanny, and I'm not sure she would get a good reference from her previous employer. She used the life insurance to pay off all of their debts, including the mortgage on their home, but now she's started to run through the savings she had. She came over with the kids to see if we would give her money from our son's inheritance. We told her that it was spoken for. We said that we could help her out with stuff for the kids, but that she would need to get a job to support her family. She said we were family, so I said that she had basically ignored and sidelined us for years. We're only family now that she needs us. I said that we would take care of our grandchildren, but she needed to work. Afterwards, I was discussing it with my spouse, and they feel I was harsh, that she just lost her husband. I said that she just lost her meal ticket. Yeah, that sounds like one of those situations. The nanny saw an opportunity to maybe get in with the husband and take that nice life she saw that the wife had. Little did she know that it wasn't gonna last long. And now here she is with a couple of kids and no experience. Well, the only way to get experience is to go out there and get a job. Yeah, you can ask your family for some money, but they're not going to float you forever. Like our original poster said, they're willing to help out with the kids, but you can't expect them to just pay for everything you need for the rest of your life. Congratulations, you managed to skate by this long, but life has caught up. It's time you step up to the plate. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. Or if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Jerk, give Am I the Genius a shot. Everything linked in the description.